Today on the Hustling Artist Podcast, we have Camille Moten, dance artist living in Central Jersey. She comes to us to share her dance experiences with us, and I'm going to let her introduce herself and have her talk to us about who she is, her experiences, and sort of where she's going.
Wow, thank you. I'm Camille. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. You said I am a dance artist. I'm from Somerset, New Jersey originally. Currently live in Elizabeth, and I'm a freelance artist throughout the tri-state area. I am completing my master's of fine arts in dance at Rutgers University, Mason Gross School of the Arts, and I'm currently working on my thesis project and a performance event, Ellis Trip. Um, and that's me right now.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Can you give us a little bit of rundown about what Ellis Trip is?
Sure. So it's an interdisciplinary performance event. It's hosted within an immersive social theater context. And we're really exploring a new take or our ideas of the new Black performance art renaissance of the emerging 2020s coming out of, 100 years from the Harlem Renaissance. What does our Renaissance of look like right now as Black bodies, Black and brown bodies? And so really we're exploring it within the jazz culture. So that's jazz music and dance, visuals, poetry suites. So we're really creating a world within a reimagined nightclub.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
How did you come to wanting to highlight Black bodies and reimagine this Harlem Renaissance?
Well, when you come to the end of your master's program and they tell you you have to have a thesis, you start thinking, well, what do I care about? What am I going to do? And so I started looking at myself because a lot of my work comes from my experience as a Black woman. Um, and so I was looking at a little bit how I started my dance career, and I, I had a lot of training in jazz and musical theater. And so I was like, but where does this come from? What are the origins? What are the social, kind of the ethnography of jazz, and realizing that a lot of people didn't really know or still don't know. Or we think about jazz, we think about what comes to mind, I don't know, like Bob Fosse, Chicago, Jazz Hands, Spirit Fingers, oh, 5, 6, 7, 8, and all those great things that are part of it, and they fall under that umbrella. But upon further research, realizing that jazz forms were actually it was a social vernacular that was created by African plantation slaves here in America, really coming out of their epic history of coming out of Africa, right? And so that starting to develop and be this social experience, this improvisational experience that reflected their everyday life, things that they were seeing. And then with the Great Migration coming up north and making its way into Harlem and really becoming this like underground scene. And then, we see it on Broadway, but not realizing, oh, well, there was an underground Black Broadway, and where, actors that were Caucasian could come in and learn these forms from these Black artists, but they didn't have a platform to be on the stage. So just like that whole history was really interesting to me and important to me. And so, yeah, that's when I started looking at it closer and figuring out how I could transpose that on a contemporary.
Gotcha. So basically, I'm sorry. So basically, you take this idea of the improvisation of slaves and them dealing with their everyday lives, and that idea of the migration and that really small nugget of artistry traveling all the way to New York City, at that period of time. So such a rich time for art, and then you're flipping that into today. What does that look like today? What does your everyday life look like today? The music that we hear today, the experiences that we have today, very much different from the 1920s.
Yeah, absolutely. And I keep kind of pushing that contemporary context because our experience right now as people of color is does have a voice. I feel like there's a lot of artists that are from different disciplines that are really trying to paint our our experience, trying to, give us voice, representation, agency. And so from the dance perspective, yeah, that was really the driving factor for me. Like, well, what is our experience today?
Mhm.
You have all these things, Black Lives Matter, and, these reaffirmations of the self, like melanin, and
Mhm.
like, what is our aesthetic? What is our beauty? How do we feel empowered as these bodies of color? But then, like, what's the other side that we deal with too? The resilience,
Sure.
all of that. So, yes, it's all a part of it. It's all a part of Ella's trip.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, can we let's back up a little
Let's
bit
take it back. Take it back.
and let's talk about some of your training experiences, maybe some of the ones that really mattered in shaping you into the artist that you are today and all the different facets that you are an
Mhm.
artist.
Sure. My training primarily was in New Jersey growing up, and I worked at NJPAC, their Youth Artist Institute, Governor's School, different studios, all of that stuff. And then I got my BFA, my undergraduate degree at Temple University in their dance department, which was led by Dr. Karamu Welsh Asante at the time. And while I was there, I was also supplementing my training at Philadelphia. They
Mm,
had a an instruction and training program, like a pre-professional program
mhm,
for their young adults. And so I was in that,
mhm,
and then danced with their second company. And so really, like, that was my home away from home at Danko.
mhm,
And training at Temple at the same time. And so after my 4 years there, I moved to New York and danced at Broadway Dance Center in their professional semester. And that was a flip from going from concert dance training to
mhm,
more commercial,
mhm.
which definitely satisfied my musical theater background and
Sure.
interests. So met a lot of really great choreographers there, industry professionals, and started doing a lot of gigs through that experience. And then yeah, and then coming back to Rutgers for my master's 6 years later,
Yeah.
7 years. Yeah.
Well, you bring up two interesting points to me in that training and then also in your experiences with Broadway Dance Center. The
Hmm.
first point with your training is um, first question is, can you speak to any young dancer out there about the importance of a specific high level training experience like Philadelphia, or
Hmm.
how important that is? Because I know for us as musicians, um, even when you're uh, graduate student or a master student, there's festivals that you go to, and in those festivals all these people collect. And so I've been to several festivals, and when you go to those festivals, something you transform and something happens. And then can you speak to the importance of those types of high level
Sure.
experiences?
I feel like it can't be understated how important it is to get as much professional experience as possible within your training, because otherwise, you never have the real world. The real world never meets you. Well, I don't want to say never, but in studio or in the classroom, um, the beauty about that is you get to be a student and you can make mistakes and you can be yourself and you can, fall and get up and have that support, have that community feel. And your teachers are invested and, they love you, I'm sure. But there's a safety net there too. And so I think when you find times in your training where you can be at a professional school or do a winter intensive or a summer intensive or take gigs while you are still training, it's just a different ball game because all of that freedom and that safety net, it kind of goes out the door. You still have a level of freedom because you're exploring yourself artistically, and so that's exciting. But what you get is that discipline, that professionalism,
Mm.
that okay, when you walk in the room here, you need to already have this piece already in your body. You need to come like warmed up. You need to be able to, step right in and really join these professionals. And you step up a level. Yeah.
So basically, you have a flip from what academia, even collegiate programs are teaching, which is they're supposed to have you prepared for these experience, but there's a level up from collegiate programs that it's just a different like level
It's a different
altogether.
level and it's a different skill set. I mean, yeah, I can think about being at if I compare Temple and Danko. I remember, something so simple that dancers won't understand is So you're learning a really complex combination on the right, it's moving across the floor. And then after you do that and you work it out, the teacher will then stop and they'll say, okay, let's figure it out on the left. And so then they're going to walk you through it. Or maybe they'll say, okay, you take a couple minutes and work it out, and then I'm here if you need me. And so there's that. I don't want to call it hand holding because I don't want to minimize it. It's important to have that process of learning how you flip and, muscle memory and how things feel different on one side than the other. But then I think about that going to Danko, they'll say, okay, we're learning this piece, and we're not going to flip it for you. You're going to go in the green room and you're going to watch the piece on a video. And the recording is from someone recording it inside of the house. So obviously it's a mirror image because now I'm looking at it, from an audience perspective, but I got to learn it from a dancer's perspective. So there's no one telling you this is how you flip it. And okay, that arm to the left is really actually with your right arm. You have to just do it, and you have a time crunch and how long you have to get that done, and then you need to come in the studio with it done and ready. So that's that difference of expectations,
level of preparedness,
and professionalism and just discipline. But it's a different skill set that's really important for dancers that want to transition into the professional world, because auditioning. Oh yeah, absolutely. You go into an audition, they teach you 4/8 counts, in 5-10 minutes, and you're expected to just do it. And so how do you learn how to pick up choreography fast if you're taking, more time in the studio?
Sure.
So you have to put yourself out there, and you have to practice auditioning. You can't just go to an audition and expect to book. I mean, sometimes that happens, but more often than not, you have to go to many, many auditions and learn the art to auditioning, learn the mechanics to it before you can really just excel and fly when you're at an audition.
Sure. The second part of my question, you piqued my interest when you said, talking about Broadway Dance Center and talking about how that kind of opened your eyes to commercial dance art, right? And one thing that I know that I wasn't aware of when I was in my undergrad is that how many facets of little segments of places that I could use my skill set or begin to train more into my skill set. So can you talk a little bit about commercial dance and a little bit maybe even more segueing into like the economy of dance and what that means for you guys, because I know that what that means for us, but what does that mean for you as a dancer?
Sure. That's a loaded question because when you speak to the economy of dance, there's so many paths, there's so many directions or focuses that you can take. I'm trying to think of where to start. I guess I could talk about my experience.
Yeah, and I can even qualify the question a little bit more too, because I think I can lead you where I'm trying to go.
Okay.
I often, one of the reasons also why I created this podcast is because I think it's important to understand what kind of money is involved with what you pick.
Sure.
And so oftentimes like when we audition for orchestra jobs and let's say we win a job and the contract is for 8 performances or 6 or 5 or whatever. That doesn't mean that I can quit everything else. It doesn't mean that, the income that's coming in from that really great experience and that high level experience, because I just competed, I just beat out a bunch of people.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that is going to be economically able to support who I am as a human being. I have to eat, I have to pay the bills, the lights have to stay on.
Sure.
So that's a little bit more of what I'm talking about with the economy. And then you piqued my interest about the commercial, because I don't always think about the different parts that we could all end up in. So
sure. So you have in the dance industry, right? And if you're looking at just strictly performing artists, and so taking out teachers, choreographers, writers, for everything,
sure.
For just looking at performers, and you have, say you're somebody like me that you went to college for dance, right? You got your post-secondary degree, you come out with your bachelor's, and you're like, okay, I want to dance. So if you go to an institution that's primarily ballet and modern focused or Western focused, most of those dancers are coming out and they're trying to book with a company. They're like, I want to do concert dance. That's what we call it. So if I'm just going off from the top of my head, just the big name professional companies you would recognize is like Alvin Ailey, Martha Graham, Ballet Hispanico, Jose Limon. There's like
Mm-hmm.
lots of them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Evidence, Camille Brown, whatever. So, you say, I want to go to those things. So you're going to continue training. You're going to continue taking your classes, your ballet classes, your modern classes.
Paying for classes.
You're paying for classes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Classes are going to range between $10 and $22, depending on, if you're training in Brooklyn versus where in the city you're paying for these classes. So a lot of dancers realize very soon, like, oh, I was taking 4 hours of dance every day in college, and now I got to pay $20 for 1 hour class. So how do I manage that? And you start to learn, like, maybe I'm gonna learn Pilates and yoga and train myself in my apartment, and condition myself each day. And I can only really pay for one class a day, or a couple of classes a few days a week. You have to determine that yourself. So, and now some companies, if you were to book, they will give you free class as part of your contract. But now these companies that I just named, you have some major ones that maybe can offer you a 52-week contract, and they can pay, but that might mean that they don't pay health and benefits. They might just pay for the work. However, you have smaller companies, more freelance or more, I'll say smaller, meaning the budget, not in artistic integrity, because I feel like that's part of the issue in dance. We have these hierarchies and who gets presented and whose work gets selected, but we're all making work, and that's important, but it has to do with budgets and all of that good stuff. So you can dance with a smaller company and not get paid for performances, but not get paid for rehearsals or what have you. So there's a rank there. Now, that's conscious dance aside. You also can go in and you say, I want to dance in the commercial world. So that could be theater, right? So you have people, I think, always think about Broadway, but you also have national tours. You have regional theaters. You have a lot of dancers will graduate and they'll book like cruises. They'll make a cruise line, like a Norwegian cruise or a Carnival cruise, those entertainment on those ships. They book dancers for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12-month contracts, depending on the cruise line and what they can offer. You also could, another commercial gig might be like going actually to these, what is it called? Like resorts. Like I have a friend that booked at a resort at Turks and Caicos and was there for a year dancing. So, there's like a range of commercial opportunities in the theater perspective. Then you have like people that go to LA or New York and they get agents and they'll book you in commercials or tours with artists. And that's a whole another ballpark. So there's a range of the economy in the industry.
Right. And I guess the really rude question is, with when you're looking at the range, right? If we're looking at the best companies that, our eyes know, and their 52-year contracts or 52-week contracts or 52-year contract, that's a good contract, or a 40-week contract or something like that.
Sure.
And what you're really talking about is not a lot of money. It's, you might still have to support yourself in other ways. And you might, as an example, I worked with a producer who was nominated for a Grammy, but he also he worked at the mall, as a manager and a retail,
That's
and so
very, very plausible.
yeah,
it's more than plausible. That's more like the reality of a lot of dancers, because we don't, the pay is not comparable to, I think, and I'm assuming this, and if I compare us to other disciplines, I feel like dance, we're at the bottom of the pool when it comes to compensation. And for whatever reason, part of it is that dance is, I think, part of the newest, or like the youngest sibling in the fine arts. If you want to look at it like that. I mean, I argue with that because people have been dancing since the beginning of time. But if you're looking at high art and what's on stage, we're new as an art form, and I think that's part of it too.
Right, but because of that reality, you guys have to have a lot of other hustles. Entrepreneurship has to be there. You have to fig-
Hustle's the word for us.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
figure out ways of sustaining your career when your job opportunities are 1 year, 1 year, 1 year, 1 year,
Sure.
yeah,
And sometimes just 1 month to 1 month, or
right.
or you rehearse for 3 months for one show.
Mm-hmm.
So it's yeah, there's a lot of conversation about that. And I mean, really, every dancer that I know, I read this article one time. I wish I could think of the author, but she was saying how we're the generation of slash artists,
Mm-hmm.
slash dancers. This dance generation, we're slash artists. So we're never just dancer, right? Like gone are the years from like the 40s and the 50s where dancers would train, every day with Merce Cunningham
Mm-hmm.
or Lester Horton or Martha Graham, and they would train and grow up through their school, and then they would join their company, and then they would dedicate their life's work to performing the form and then teaching the form and then retire in that form and like have a beautiful modern contemporary life.
Mm-hmm.
Those days aren't here anymore. And so, dancers now are performers slash choreographers slash dance writers slash educators
Mm-hmm.
slash advocates slash I do marketing for this company, or I bus tables. We do so many things to keep the lights on and keep the food on the table. And that's my biggest question, like how do I walk through this, my career path, my passion, my choice, and not just survive, but how do you thrive? How do you
Right.
find financial stability, find medical stability,
Sure.
find all of that. That work-life balance comes from feeling comfortable, with the work that you do, find, and so that it can support your life and you can really find that balance. And so, yeah, that's something that we deal with every day.
Yeah, I find that I think it's a trick for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're really not thinking in terms of how to make revenue or how to survive, or entrepreneurial, in that type of way, in some sort of way, that you're really are always looking to someone else for your next opportunity. And if you're waiting for someone to give you an opportunity, it's almost never going to come.
Mm-hmm.
It's just happenstance. And so um, I've seen a lot of musicians create side gigs based on their skill set. And if there's anything that I could impart with this podcast, it's about how to look at your skill set, your personal skill set, and be able to say,
Absolutely.
what is it that I'm good at? I'm also good. I might be a great, stick thrower, you know, but I'm also really great at uh creating and manage like systems
Right.
and managing systems. And I'm really great because you have to be that way, or like looking at your skill set and saying, where can I utilize these skills for the best career I can possibly have.
Absolutely. And I feel like I've had so many side hustles, and I don't like to call them. Some people will say like, "Oh, this is my real job," and dance.
Mhm.
And I'm like, "Don't do that, because you're minimizing your art and who
Mhm.
you are." Like, if, at least either put them all in the same plane or make dance your real job, and everything else your side
Supporting
hustle, or you're
that. Yeah.
supporting that.
Yeah.
If you are walking in this artist life
Mhm.
and that's what you choose to be. And, I went from like first coming to New York and being at Broadway Dance Center and working, coming in, we had to be there at like 7 for these workshops, 7 a.m. And then we would be in class from like 9 to 12, 1 o'clock,
Mhm.
straight through every day. And then I would leave there and go to a restaurant. I used to work at Ruby Foods in Times Square, and I would be there for the dinner shifts. We had to check in at like 3:30 for pre-shift, and I
Mhm.
would work till 1 a.m.
Mhm.
every day, like
Mhm.
Sunday to Sunday, and then the only times I would have off is if like I had rehearsal, or a lot of dancers choose restaurant gigs. If people were wondering like, why are dancers always or actors or whoever, we don't love bussing tables, but what it is, it gives us the flexibility of, if you have to, call out the next day because you have a gig or an audition, something last minute, it's really easy to get coverage, because really a lot of people are also artists, and they want to
Mhm.
cover. Like, you work a lot when you can, and then when you need to dip off, people understand and they'll cover you. And then also when you need to leave that job, so you booked a show,
Sure.
you're gone for 6 months, they don't really care. They just replace you. They find somebody else. And there's like thousands, probably 100,000 restaurants in New York City. Like, you
Yeah.
can find another job very quick.
Sure.
But what I tell dancers now that I'm, lived a little bit, coming into my 30s, um, if you can, for example, Rutgers, they have these opportunities for their students to get training in yoga. There's yoga certification program. There's a I don't I think, but they have a Pilates certification
Right.
program,
Yeah.
and they have the ABT certification. And I was like, any of those things, those teacher training programs are thousands of times better than bussing tables
Sure.
because you are on your feet, you're working long hours, and if
Right.
you and you're getting paid a lot more money in, teaching yoga during the week, and then
Right.
that's good for your body,
Right.
and it's economic, and it just makes so much more sense.
Sure.
Yeah, if you
Absolutely.
can,
Yeah. No, I think that's a really great, I mean, that's what we do. We use our other offshoot skills
right.
for something else. But
I was gonna say, okay, sorry, go ahead.
but I wanted to go ahead.
I was just gonna say too, to start to speak to when you were talking about your other skills,
Mhm.
not just the serving or the Pilates and yoga and stuff, but your other skills in terms of like writing, if you're a great writer or
Sure.
you're good at marketing, or you're interested in science or whatever else, piques your interest, you're great at numbers
Social
and
media.
accounting. Oh
It's a
my God,
skill.
so many dancers have made a career out of social media
Yeah.
marketing, or
Yeah.
I know a lot of dancers who are also photographers, but just, yeah, there's just so many different things that you can
To expand.
to expand
And
upon
also
that.
to help yourself, right? So if you're a photographer, then you can take pictures and you can direct your own shoot, you know what I mean? Or
Exactly.
you can edit your own things, you know. I'm a instrumentalist, but I know how to utilize, these types of workstations, and I can record
Yeah,
things
I work
and
for Ballet Hispanic. I'm on faculty there, but
right.
I'm also part-time work as an artistic associate. And really, primarily, what I do is communications and
Mhm.
marketing, online marketing or social media
Mhm.
marketing for the School of Dance. And because I do also have a background in that,
Yeah.
working that at other nonprofits that weren't within the arts, but now I can translate those skills to an arts organization that I believe in,
Sure.
and that serves me in other ways.
Yeah, and also like, in this this will be I'll get off this subject, but to understand that there are jobs within our community
Hmm.
that are being filled by people who aren't artists,
Exactly.
that's a hard thing to sort of rectify. Like if you are going to be a musician, and but you're not getting the work that you want, why not take a job in an arts administration, something
Why not?
somewhere,
Rather than
keep
taking it out of
insurance company.
Coca-Cola. Yeah.
Yeah, like
No
yeah.
shade to Coca-Cola.
No, absolutely. But
Yeah.
but you know what I mean? Like you're staying in your art form, keeping your passion sort of kindled fire,
Absolutely.
something like that. So one thing I did want to talk to you about was we both women of color, we're both trained in Western art. And I wanted to talk a little bit about your experience as you started to grow in Western art, and um m- maybe talk a little bit about the challenges, really, that you've experienced. And it might not be the same challenges that I've experienced, but just in this world, things that you've had to sort of shake off to continue to move forward.
Hmm. That's a good question. The first thing that comes to mind, especially like within training, because one thing that dancers of any color have to reconcile with a lot of times is like your own body
Mm.
body image,
Hmm.
right? And it's hard for dancers because we stare in a mirror all day, and we're constantly judging ourselves from a purely just like visual perspective. We're looking at ourselves, we're looking at our lines, we're looking at how we're dancing in real time, but then also like on film, like because we look back at film and we critique it. We're always critiquing ourselves, like our bodies, which is very personal and like intimate and vulnerable. And if you don't have the right headspace, if you're not a mature artist or growing professional, and I still deal with this myself now. So imagine like when you're young and you're a teenager or a preteen growing up, and you're in studios with, and you're most times the only Black child, or just child of color. That happened to me a lot until actually probably till I got to Philadelphia, and I was 18 at that time. So, and I started dancing.
And what was that like for you when you experienced now really high level experience, but all people of color?
It was both, and it was both like beautiful and exciting because I was like, oh my gosh, these people look like me. And then I looked up to like the first company and they were just like these gorgeous, stunning like ballerinas, but they had this like jazz, this spirit, this fire, and they looked like me. And so that was exciting. But then also like now now it's like we're all at this high level and
Mm-hmm.
we were all our onlys at our
Mm-hmm.
own studios or schools
Mm-hmm.
of dance, and now we made it out and we're here together. And so now there's this competition and there's this like there's this judgment that you're not just doing to yourself, but you're doing to the people next to you a little bit.
Sure.
And then coming in as like the newcomer, because I'm not from Philly, and a lot of people there from Philly, it's like had that kind of thing. Like, who
Yeah.
are you? And you have to prove yourself.
So it was a good experience to be amongst people of color.
It was a great experience. Yeah. It definitely stepped my game up.
Yeah.
Definitely. And it prepared me for that, like that competition that you need, or like
Sure.
that fire, that like push, and that like you gotta know that you have a seat at the table for a reason. Like you're in this room for a reason. And so
Right.
it does empower you, but it also makes you work really, really hard.
Yeah.
So
sorry, I interrupted you. So you said you experienced maybe being the only African American child in a class until you got to
a lot of
Philadelphia,
studios.
and that was very empowering. But then even in your collegiate experiences too.
Yeah. I would say that again, most spaces, most dance spaces I was in my training experiences were predominantly white.
Mm-hmm.
So in the collegiate setting, it was different because you're older, but you're also reconciling with that yourself. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Who am I at at this time? This first time I'm on my own. I'm this adult trying out adulthood. Yeah.
Well, do you find that artists of color are pigeonholed into certain genres?
Absolutely.
Because
that
I know
happens.
you were saying your ballet is probably your your love.
I definitely, yeah. If I mean, I don't like to pick my favorite, so I'm not gonna say, but I'll say that
Are
ballet is
super trained in.
yeah. I've received the most training in ballet,
Yeah.
definitely. And when I was in college, a big critique that I would get was that I danced, too soft or like too graceful, or
Mhm.
I didn't have a lot of texture dynamics, and they expected me because I was a black female
Mm.
to have these synchronized syncopated rhythms,
Yeah.
and can be sharp, and be to the floor and in the ground, and I should be able to like. And I had African training at Temple, but that was the first time I had African
Mhm.
training, and
And
like, oh, you
don't know
should
how
know
to,
this. You
yeah.
should know this, or you should know how to dance hip hop, and it being and feeling awkward to me,
Yeah.
and then like saying to myself like, well, what's wrong with me? Like this is who I am. This is
How
my
you
ancestry, my
train.
artistry. I should know. I
Right.
should know this as a black woman, like how
So
to
then it
move
like
like that.
actually put a
Yeah, it was
stigma
it
on
was
the whole.
yeah, it was difficult for
Yeah.
me to cross over, and that classic thing like, I'm gonna take your black card away. You don't know how to do these things that like we should know how to do, and I had
Mhm.
a hard time with that actually.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So this is interesting. So because you were so trained, because you were so well
Well,
trained,
Western
Western
ballet
ballet,
training.
yeah,
Yeah.
But
Because yeah.
when you got into those other spaces, right?
hmm
who was taking your black card? Were they black people, or or was it just like
Mm,
a specific like, oh, this is just are you projecting that on
it
yourself?
was both. I think it was like my peers and myself. Yeah,
Right.
but would do it in jest.
Joke, yeah.
But it's also like that, there's truth in jest, and I would really, I was really sensitive, and I would hang on to that,
Right.
and so I probably beat myself up more
Yeah.
than my friends did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's also like a shade um that um you don't have to be a hip hop dancer or a African, or non-Western to be able to express blackness.
Yeah, a lot of
And
time.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No.
But and I think that's like the thing is like there's so many different ways of expression. Like, why does it all just have to be what we see commercially?
Yeah, there's a lot of like, I mean, there's two sides of it. You have some institutions, if we're talking about, on collegiate dance, that a lot of black artists feel like there's no space for them. There's like, okay, there's all that's here to offer is ballet and modern, and that's it. And like, I might have a different background, and not only is it the technique classes are in ballet and modern, but also like the choreography classes are under that lens, and the improvisation are under that lens, and the dance composition classes. So it's like
Mm.
I'm not getting anything outside of this narrow scope.
Mhm.
Like, what if I was really interested in like Bollywood dance or like
Mm-hmm.
classic Chinese dance. And like,
Mm-hmm.
or I had different training. There's no room for me to breathe. Like I can't breathe here. So there's that side of it. But then the other side of it is like, oh, because you have this different, um, background to you and this different cultural context, all the work that you do and all the dancing that you create and how you move should be within that. We should look at you and recognize like your history from just the way
Right.
you move. And like people
Mm-hmm.
think like abstraction is, I ask myself like, oh, is abstractionism or is abstract dance or postmodern dance like only for white people? Like, do they not have to carry that history with them? Do they not have to create movement that represent a people because of whiteness? So, those are questions that I ask.
Mm-hmm.
But to that point, like I look at Ellis Trip, and that's all within our history and our current experience. So I don't really know what side of it I'm on. I'm just kind of in it,
There's no
looking at
side.
everything. Yeah, there's no side. It's just
There's no
all
side.
information.
Yeah,
It's all knowledge, and you move forward with what you
absolutely.
can. So
Absolutely. Well, with the time that we have left, let's talk about what you have on the horizon that's not, on campus. Because I know, um, so many professional students get this rap of like, oh, you're in school still, so I can still teach you like a student. But like, you guys are really like not like,
busy.
yeah, you're like working. So, can you tell me what's on the horizon? What you got coming up off of campus?
Sure. Well, for I guess artistic projects, sorry, I'm thinking because like everything in my mind is like my thesis, and so I'm trying to push that aside. But I have a opportunity coming up with Crossroads Theater dance, not dance theater. Oh my gosh, Crossroads Theater Company. Um, I did their season last year, and so I'm rejoining them again with their NJ Pack season, and
Mm-hmm.
they're doing Duke Ellington Sophisticated Ladies.
Mm,
And so I'm supposed to be assisting the choreographer for that show. And that's supposed to be coming up next month in March.
okay.
So doing that at the same time as producing my own evening length work is
Yeah.
quite a challenge. But I was with them last year for Eight Misbehaving at NJ Pack, and that was an awesome experience.
Sure.
I assisted Tony Award winner Andre DeShields, Mr. Andre DeShields.
Mm-hmm.
He's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was happy when they asked me to come back. So that's coming up. And my graduation, that's an event for me, May 19th.
Yeah.
Um, and really trying to, with this show, get the show legs, so I'm contacting different presenters to see if I can produce Ellis Trip again
Mm-hmm.
in the future. I would really love it to be fully produced by 2020. But perhaps like smaller iterations of the show.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, I'm continuing to dance and audition. I'm still auditioning out here.
Right.
And I teach for records for the department, for
Mm-hmm.
the extension division. I also teach at Ballet Hispanico as well. I'm on faculty there.
Sure.
So and just working,
All the time.
just a lot. There's a lot going
Yeah.
on, but I'm very lucky. I'm very blessed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Ellis Trip is almost done,
Mhm.
and you have like a full on immersive performance.
To which you're the music director for, if we can shout you out for all of your work on the projects,
Thank
leading
you.
and all the
Thank you.
music, all the sound,
Thank you.
sounds, yeah, everything.
No,
The
that's
band, we have a live band. Misha's
yeah, we do. We have an Ellis Trip band.
Ellis Trip band.
But how has it been? And this is how we'll end this
Okay.
conversation. How has it been managing all these people? Because you have like something around 20 some odd people to manage, and then connecting them. That's not talking about the part where you have to manage the people at Rutgers and what they have to do. So what
Mhm.
about what are some, if you could speak to any person out there on any level who has to manage, or if you're coming into a project and you agree to do something with someone,
Mhm.
on any of that.
Any of that.
Yeah, any of that.
This has been my first time producing my own. I've produced smaller, work as
Yeah.
a freelance artist, one piece, standalone pieces.
Sure.
I had work that was commissioned, but that was 15 minutes. So now this is like an hour
Yeah.
show. And I am managing a cast of about 12 dancers. There's a crew. There's you have your band,
Mhm.
got visual and a visual curator, got costume,
Sure.
a technical team, my thesis committee, records publications,
Mhm.
communications department. So yeah, there's a lot of people that you interface with. I think the biggest thing that I'm learning, and I'm still in it, and it's been about, I would say, like a year process, about a year since I
Mhm.
even like had this thought in my mind and started grabbing my own personal team. That was last March of 2017. So I think what I've learned the most over this year is that 2018, excuse me,
Sure.
said 2017, is that it's so important to have communication with people. I think that's like the name of the game. Just communicating as much as you can, understanding that things change, over a year's time is a long time.
Mhm.
Your ideas change, your needs change, your expectations, the direction of the show changes, and having a team that is malleable and they
Mhm.
understand that, like what it really takes to be in a process, is so important. And people that can communicate their needs, we can all respect deadlines, respect each other's voices and opinions. Just communication is so important.
Right.
Understanding, like when you're working in an academic context and you're not maybe compensating people in the way that you would like to,
Mhm.
or in the way that they might be used to expecting, like how do you manage that? How do you ask for and advocate for what you need, but also um, be sensitive to the
Mhm.
fact that you're requiring people's time and energy, and you want to appreciate that, always leading with gratitude, but also trying to communicate your needs as a director is a challenge too, or something just like you're constantly
Mhm.
negotiating. And then just staying on top of everything, managing people. Like, how do you manage artists? I've never
Mhm.
had to do that really before, but I've been working with a lot of artists, both students
Yeah.
and professionals.
Mhm.
How do you manage their needs, like
Mhm.
their journey in the
Mhm.
work?
Mhm.
Their bodies, like they get tired too. And like a lot of my student performers are, a lot of them are seniors, but even non-seniors, like they're busy. They have a
Sure.
lot of pieces that they're doing. They've got life to contest with, like,
Yeah.
but they're all invested and they care and they work really hard. And so it's like, how do you again balance appreciating that, but still pushing them
Mhm.
to give their best selves so that
Mhm.
the work gets what it needs, but also that they get what they need out of this too, because this is an experience that is very valuable, I think, for anybody that's in it, like in a long-term process, a long-term work. Like you can, a lot of those lessons won't make sense until years later, but
Sure.
it will
Yeah.
eventually. So yeah, it's growing me, it's stretching me.
Mhm.
I've learned so much in this time, and so hopefully every time after just gets easier and easier and easier.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, being music director on the project, I definitely have learned quite a bit in terms of like, you know, about dance.
Hmm.
Number one, like, I've been doing this for a little bit of time, but even though trying to put on this evening length work and watching the process unfold, um, it's taught me about like that communication and that kind of like, all right, how do you best service the project, how do
Right.
you best service and push forward the project. So but I really appreciate you being
I
here.
appreciate you having me.
um
Thank you.
I hope that you'll come back and you'll see me and talk to me
I hope
again.
I did a good job.
You did a great job.
Okay.
You did a great job. And I think it's really important, just if I can, end in the podcast in this way, it's for people who are on the other side of their degrees to see people who have completed their degrees and the different paths that they've taken. Because obviously, we know that it's not a straight shot to what you want. And so, I think it's really great to have people like you on um, to conclude my first season. And I'm really excited
Yes.
to be able to close it in this way.
I love it. Can I give a final thought to dancers?
Yes, final thought.
I mean, I know you have a huge audience, but if there's any dancers out here listening, I just would say that, I was somebody who almost stopped dancing. And I think a lot of dancers deal with that
Hmm.
because I mean, I think artists deal with that in general.
Hmm.
You come to a place where you're like, is this worth it? Is this for me?
Sure.
Am I good enough? Do I have the emotional capacity and the physical bandwidth to like do this for my life, for my
Hmm.
career? And I think that's okay. It's every feeling you have, every thought,
Yeah.
any process is okay. Like go through it. And when that happens, stop and pause, and respite's really important, and reflection. If you need to journal, if you need to like get it out some other way, dance can't always be your release. People always say dance is a release. Like, well, not when you're a dancer sometimes. Like sometimes you need another type of release, and that's perfectly fine. But just understand that like, no, there is no A to B.
Sure.
It's like A to A squared, and then you come back and go back to Z, and then like cut across diagonally and reach B. Like it just, you just constantly changing your path, and just know that your goals might shift. And it's all beautiful. It's all a part of the journey. But like, you can do it. You know, we're out here. We're working.
Well, thank you. That was really inspiring.
Oh, you're welcome.
All
Thanks for having me.
Have a great day.
Better than anything else you can imagine. If you're going to try, go all the way. There is no other feeling like that. You will be alone with the gods, and the nights will flame with fire.
This is only the beginning.